Okay, so I think in the interest of time, we will begin, and then we'll catch up folks who are joining us as they are coming on in the chat. Welcome back to everyone who is joining us from this morning. I am very excited to be here again with everyone. And especially because this really is a special workshop with a really important topic and also inspiring and practical messages that I think we'll be all getting. So my name is Julika von Starkeberg. I'm part of the organizing team for this conference, which is made possible by Garnet Health, the Orange County Youth Bureau, and the Orange County Child Care Council. Before we begin, I just want to familiarize everyone briefly with the features in Zoom. When you're not looking at something, or actually when you don't want to say something, it would be great if you could mute yourself to ensure optimal sound quality for all. But we are, I think this is a participatory workshop, so you'll be able to chime in. You are also welcome to leave your video on. We'd love to see you if possible, but of course, that is at your discretion. The video on and off buttons, as well as the mute buttons at the bottom of your screen, either the camera or the microphone. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can put those in the chat, and then we'll make sure to respond there during the interactive parts of the workshop. And you can also show your appreciation with some of the awesome emojis that Zoom is offering. Yay, you can see clapping. And so there's a much broader variety now available that you can use. Lastly, depending on the device that you're joining us from, you can change the view to either speaker view or make it a gallery view with the Brady Bunch or whatever is possible at the time. And then we would love to have your name in the chat. If you wish to receive continuing education credits, just put those in there. And then either at the link at the end of the program. So for this workshop, we're able to offer teacher education program credits. And you put your name in the chat, and then we'll send you a link to hook you up with that. So, without further ado, it is my honor to introduce the workshop leaders, Erasma Beras Monticciolo? No, please say it.
Monticciolo.
Monticciolo, see, okay, good. Thank you. Sure. So yes, I appreciate that. And then Yatonia Chestnut to you. So I will give you a quick introduction to them just here. So, oh, now I went to the wrong page. Look at that. So Yatonia Chestnut is a program graduate and community ambassador, is a child care specialist and military veteran with more than 10 years of experience interacting and collaborating with multiple levels of management and diverse cultural audiences. During her time as a logistics specialist with the United States Army, Yatonia consistently achieved exceptional results while leading a team of 6 in a dynamic, fast-paced environment in both civilian and military capacity. Additionally, she has worked in the education system for more than 8 years. Yatonia graduated from Power of Two's ABC program in June 2019 and served as a community ambassador in the 2020 cohort. She's a mother of 3 beautiful boys. Erasma Beras Monticciolo is the co-founder and executive director, is Afro-Latina and grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. She's a mother of 2 boys. She's an activist, entrepreneur, and co-founder and executive director of Power of Two. Erasma is committed to decolonizing parenting. Yay! Which means helping parents break free from the dominant colonial European parenting framework that has dehumanized Black, Brown, Indigenous bodies and tap into what comes natural to us: responsiveness, nurturance, collaboration, and community to help our children thrive. Erasma holds a BA from St. John's and an MPA from NYU Robert Wagner Graduate School of Public Policy. With more than 15 years of experience in the field, Erasma has successfully established relationships with policymakers, community-based organizations, and social change groups to create partnerships and build support for a variety of programs serving historically marginalized populations in New York City. Erasma is a strong believer in healing-informed practice and approaches in all of her work, and with that framework in mind. She's a 2019 Promising Ventures Fellow at Aspen Institute Healthy Communities Senior Fellow and an NYU Steinhardt Senior Leaders Fellow. She's also served on the board of the New York 0 to 3 Network and the Citizens Committee for Children. So as you can see, we have very distinguished program leaders here with us today, and it is my pleasure to turn over the microphone to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Yulka. Really happy to be here and to be sharing space with everyone. Yatonia.
Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. So before we actually dive into the presentation and the workshop with the two of you today, I am going to share a video with you. You might have seen it if you've attended a session yesterday, which sort of helps us to center the voices of young people to talk about some of their experiences with a program that is called Act for Change that they participated in this last year. And yes, there's also a workshop going on simultaneously that is talking about this program. So I highly encourage and invite you to go back to the recording of that after this session. So the video is 9 minutes long, and I really am excited to share these voices with you in just a moment when I can find my right screen. So just bear with me. Here we go. Oh, hold on. I have to press the right button. So just 1 minute.
This is a coordinated activity happening across this nation. And so we are in a state of emergency. Black people are dying in a state of emergency. We cannot look at this as an isolated incident.
Okay, we had an issue in a similar situation yesterday. And let's just see if this is going to reload. Okay, So I know that we have a really awesome program prepared, and I don't want to take time away to try to fix this. What we're going to do is we will send a link with the video out after the conference to everyone to look at, or better yet, go and visit the presentation and view the recording. What we hear from these young people is their experience in today's world as young people, obviously, especially with race and racism, and how they are hoping to make a change in the world with what they are learning, and how they're learning to understand what our community really needs. And I think the presentation today has a fantastic outline, as you hear from both of the presenters, with their experience and their perspective and framework. So I am just going to hand it back to the both of you, and I appreciate everyone's understanding and flexibility, and yes, let's go.
Thank you so much, Yulka. I will say that I watched the video, and it is incredibly powerful and definitely resonated with me personally, but also with the work that we do at Par too. So I was hoping that we could watch it all, because I think it does a really nice, wonderful job of introducing the topic and help us do some level setting, but we will sure enough do that as we go along anyway. I'm going to turn it over to Yatonia to get us all started.
Hello, everyone. We're our Power of Two mission and our vision.
I'm not sure if we lost Yatonia. We may be having some technical. Oh, here we go. Here she is. Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Yatonia, if you'd like.
Okay.
We can, I know sometimes computers with the screen, and at the same time, if it gets a little wacky, we can, turn off the screen.
Okay.
Just so that we can at the very minimum hear you, because you have some wonderful things to share.
Right. We first launched in Brownsville, Brooklyn in 2005. And in 2019, it expanded into Highbridge, Concourse, and Hudson Points in the Bronx, which I was one of the participants in the Bronx. And in 2021, it went to Bedford-Stuyvesant, Greenport, and Bushwick. Our team consists of, it started out with 12 people, and in 2005, it reached 54 people. In addition to our partnership with different communities, we have reached over 5,000 children in New York City since 2005, starting from the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. Erasma?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. So right now, what I would like for us to do, thank you, Yatonia, for that. Andrew, if you can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I would like us to spend a little bit of time talking about, what we call the arc of history. And I will start off with a little anecdote. So recently, I had been invited to participate in a conversation with human service providers to reimagine what the space, would look like if there was support from government. And during one of the breakout sessions, one of the questions that was posed was, if you had a magic wand, and I'm sure lots of you have heard this question, if you had a magic wand, what would you do for, for a community? What would you do for your organization? And my answer was really simple. I would reconstruct our systems so that we can stop causing harm and actually support families and individuals in the way that they need and how they need. And that response was really based on my understanding of our arc as it relates to to the systems of trauma and racism. So this particular arc here is basically serves as a timeline, and it's from Zerflin, and it highlights how the concept of race and the development of systemic racism in the United States evolved over time. So, today, before we, dive into our why of an organization and our how and our what, I wanted to spend a little time contextualizing, what health, what wealth, education gaps between Black, Indigenous, and people of color and white people did not just happen overnight, but are instead the product of centuries of accumulated inequity. And race and racism have continued to impact, the lives and livelihoods of Americans because race has historically determined outcomes in our country. Next slide, please. So here, I wanted to share this video of James Baldwin. And James Baldwin was an essayist. He was a playwright, a novelist, and he also served as the voice of the American Civil Rights Movement. And he's known for his works, including Notes of a Native Son, The Fire Next Time, and Go Tell It on the Mountain. And in this video, James Baldwin is talking about urban renewal, which actually some of the youth that put the ACT video together, touch upon just a little bit. So we want to share this video with you. Andrew, we can't hear it.
A boy last week, who was 16 in San Francisco, told me on television. Thank God we got him to talk. Maybe somebody will start to listen. He said, I got no country, I've got no flag. Now he's only 16 years old. And I couldn't say you do. I don't have any evidence to prove that he does. They were tearing down his house because San Francisco is engaging, as most northern cities now are engaged, in something called urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact. Now we're talking about human beings. There's not such a thing as a monolithic wall or some abstraction called the Negro problem. These are Negro boys and girls who at 16 and 17 don't believe the country means anything that it says, don't feel they have any place here on the basis of the performance of the entire country.
But now, Jim...
No, am I exaggerating?
No, I certainly could not say that you're exaggerating. And
so, James Baldwin talks about urban renewal. And, for those of you, that aren't familiar, I'll just say that urban renewal programs gave cities funding to clean up their, impoverished areas and invest in affordable housing and urban infrastructure projects. And the policies, to some degree, did some good, right? It brought office buildings, shopping centers, and entertainment centers to cities during the height of the white flight to the suburbs and paid for universities and hospitals. Next slide, please. However, urban renewal also led to redlining, right? So the selective denial of services from federal and local governments or even private entities. And it gets its name from the historic practice of literally redlining. So you can actually see it on the map. They were redlining communities. And so mostly zip codes where there was a high minority population were outlined in red and considered dangerous and classified as high risk for mortgage lenders. And as a result of this redlining, families of color couldn't avail themselves of what is, to some degree, arguably the most significant route to family and personal wealth and wealth building, right, in the 20th century, which is home ownership. So, you can pass down a home across generations, and the protections of a home are long-term. And so urban renewal, as James Baldwin was saying, led to like BIPOC families being pushed into public housing and toward, the rental market. White families, on the other hand, were incentivized to become homeowners. And so this policy of urban renewal actually led to the displacement of more than 1 million people from their homes. And the impact of those policies reverberate today. Next slide, please. And so here I'm showing you the school to prison pipeline and its specific connection to Plessy versus Ferguson, which is an 1896 ruling in which the courts ruled that racially segregated schools were legal, which has implications in today's educational system. And you're all probably wondering, well, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 ruled that Plessy versus Ferguson was unconstitutional and moved, for integration to take place. And you're right, it did. But the implementation was limited, and so segregation actually still exists today. And so what I'm outlining here is that we have a two-tiered education system that is inequitable, with distribution of resources, applications of discipline, and access to resources and support that is different. Underfunded and under-resourced schools underdeliver for students in need of the buffer that a quality education can actually provide. And so Black and low-income students receive longer suspension than their white peers for the same types of infractions. Black students, only account for, I believe, 16% or so of enrollment, but they represent more than 30% of school-based arrests. And Black students are frequently disciplined for minor infractions such as defiance. And so these suspensions contribute to absenteeism, which is associated with lower academic performance and lower graduation rates. Next slide, please. And so on this slide, I'm talking a little bit about the carceral system. And so as many of you know, Black people are incarcerated in state prisons at 5 times the rate of white people. And there are 3 explanations for like the racial disparities in incarceration. One, of course, is policy and practices in the criminal justice system, right? So greater levels of imprisonment for drug offenses, right? The drug on war. The second is the role of implicit bias and stereotypes in decision-making. The third is structural disadvantages in communities of color, which are often associated with high rates of offending and arrest. And although imprisonment rates for Black people have fallen by 34% since, let's say, the early 2000s, so like since 2006, they still greatly exceed imprisonment rates for white people. As of 2018, Black people were in prison at a rate of 1,500 per 100,000, while white people were in prison at a rate of 268 per 100,000. And so we see the impact of incarceration on communities and families. And we know from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey that parental incarceration is one of the most common ACE scores for children of color, with greater impacts on mental health later on in life than any other ACEs. Next slide, please. And so here, I'm moving on to another institution, which is healthcare. And, pre-COVID, health disparities and their historical roots have permeated our system. In a 2005 report from the National Academy of Medicine, they found that racial and ethnic minorities receive lower quality of care than white people. And what this means is that the social determinants of health account only for a limited proportion of racial disparities in health, and that implicit bias on the part of the healthcare provider actually plays a significant role. And so overall, mortality rates for heart disease, breast cancer, and stroke decreased from 1990 to 2005, but the gap between Black and white mortality rates actually increased during that same time period. And that's really important to acknowledge, right? So all of this was happening pre-COVID. And, to just quickly touch upon COVID-19, I will say that, after doing some adjustments for age, Blacks are 3 times more likely than whites to die of COVID-19. And among adults, let's say ages between 35 to 44, Blacks are 9 times more likely than whites to die of COVID-19 for the same reasons that I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. So with more than 500,000 adult New Yorkers estimated to have depression at any given time, major depressive disorder is the single greatest source of disability in New York City, yet less than 40% report receiving care for it. The rate of adult psychiatric hospitalizations in my community of Brownsville is nearly triple the citywide rate. And that is according to the 2018 community health profile for Brownsville. And this is, attributed to difficulties in accessing preventive services and interruption in health insurance coverage. And I'm sure, as many of you heard yesterday, the Surgeon General's advisory highlighting the urgent need to address the nation's youth mental health crisis. Globally, the symptoms of anxiety and depression doubled during the pandemic. This was noted in the report, but mental health issues were already on the rise in the United States, right? As I mentioned, with emergency room visits related to depression and anxiety and similar conditions up 28% between 2011 and 2015. Next slide, please. So while I, briefly talked about a few of the interconnected institutions, there are more, like law enforcement, financial system, et cetera, whose linkages are historically rooted and culturally reinforced. Institutional racism refers to the totality of ways in which societies foster racial discrimination through mutually reinforcing inequitable systems that in turn reinforce discriminatory beliefs, values, and distribution of resources which affect overall health. And so I'm showing you this map because George Floyd's death galvanized not just our nation, but the world to mobilize to push back against these oppressive systems. Next slide, please. And so these constructs that I briefly talked about affect everything from how historically marginalized parent is able to care for their children in order to survive, how we are able to learn in educational systems, how we could or could not move forward, financially, how we could or could not remain free from violence, incarceration, or death. Next slide, please. And so these systems of oppression do not end at our family's front door. In fact, they permeate every aspect of our family's daily life. And, in fact, research conducted with Black Americans shows both biological and social impacts of centuries of trauma. Not only has the history of slavery, segregation, and discrimination become embedded in our genomes, but we have also have to contend with the day-to-day impacts of inequitable treatment on both the interpersonal and institutional level. And so from childhood, many of us come to view the world as a threatening place. And this in and of itself can cause trauma. And so, you know, at Power of Two, we believed in 2015 and have proven since then, in partnership with over 5,000 children and families, that when a program such as ours that focuses on parent coaching and supporting families is delivered through a community-led and equity-centered approach, that caregivers are supported in rebuilding confidence in their own inherent parenting abilities. And so we are able to then help them develop a sense of belonging, maximize cultural pride as a way to buffer children from the toxic stress of structural racism, and tap into what comes naturally, which is responsiveness and nurturance to heal and strengthen relationships in order to raise healthy, liberated children and support, you know, longer term community cohesion. And so we're going to pause there. Next slide, please, Andrew. And we're going to go into breakout rooms. Now that, you know, we've shared a bit about, you know, our community's history and how that has shaped our work, we want to take a few minutes to invite you all to join in a conversation for about 8 minutes or so to share responses to these questions in your small groups, to just share, how do you consider the histories of your communities when you think about, you know, engaging with them? How can that awareness really inform your service delivery model? So we're going to take a few minutes for you all to share in small groups, and then we're going to come back and share in the larger group. Andrew, if you can separate us, that'd be great.
Hi, Andrew. I'm just going to run to let my dog back inside.
No worries. I'll be here.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. Would love to hear some of the share outs. Anybody would like to share a little bit about their conversation in their small groups?
So I'll share. My
Thanks,
name is
Ramona.
I'm Ramona Burton. I thought your presentation was really good, and what I shared in our group was that you know, I grew up and was a observant and kind of indirectly recipient of urban renewal in Newburgh, New York. So I grew up in Newburgh, and I told the story of a promise to, you know, this is a, you know, the current term, to build back better, right? The promise was in the late 60s, early 70s, and it didn't happen. And when you talk about trauma, and there's in Newburgh, there's been discussion about this for decades. You know, those families and people who were directly impacted by the uproot, complete uproot of their homes. Some of those homes people owned, you know, and by eminent domain and government money, the city of Newburgh decided, we're going to just take your home, give you a little piece of money, and then tear it down. And so the intergenerational trauma of that still exists. You know, I just remember, and I grew up in that area. It was my friends, it was my playground, it was, you know, stores, there were businesses, and there were majority people of color and, you know, Black people. And I just remember one day it was all gone. Mm-hmm. And I thought I had gone away to college and come back, only to find out as an adult, when I really kind of started delving into the timeline, that no, I was there when it happened, and I have no recollection of it.
That's right.
To this day, I do. My brother, who's older than me, he remembers the bulldozing. I don't even remember it. I just remember it being gone.
Yeah, Ramona, thank you so much for sharing that. You know, that's so meaningful. I really appreciate it. And it goes to show, right, the insidiousness of it all, right? That we don't even feel it when it happens, right? And then all of a sudden it's all has changed. And you know, I remember I was fairly young. I came to this country when I was 7 years old, and I remember watching on television with my siblings and, you know, my family. We're from the Dominican Republic, so big baseball fans. We were watching, you know, the game, and I remember the announcement saying, "The Bronx is burning. The Bronx is burning." Mm. And I was like, "What is going on?" But all of that, right? The fires, the arson that happened was a result of, you know, decades of neglect in the Bronx, right? That still exists to this day. So I really do appreciate you sharing with us. I am now going to move on. Oh, and I see Kelsey shared that at least 2 of you were motivated to work in the fields due to personal experience and attracted to the potential to help foster change in our families and communities. Absolutely. You see that little man behind me, that's my little guy who's just home from school and is zipping around in our apartment. So don't forgive the intrusion, but this is family. We're all about relationships, and this is an extension of mine. So let's move on to the next section.
Erasma, before we move on, I just wanted to get David to talk for a minute, if he
would. Oh, sure, absolutely.
About Yatonia. The awareness and inform. Yeah, because he had a different perspective, because he didn't come from this background, or he didn't face some of the things that many of us have faced. It's a different, I think he had some self-awareness in this
Love it.
question, because he realized that it was only white people in his organization who founded it. So
Thank you.
give his input.
Absolutely. David, would love to hear your voice.
Thank you. Thank you. As I was sharing with Yatonia and Ramona, I was one of the founding board members of the Safe Homes in Orange County. And before we actually incorporated as a board in 1986, we had a coalition against domestic violence. And myself and the other person that was putting this together, we recruited what we felt were people that were representative of the stakeholders in the community on this issue. And as I look back on it, we didn't have any people of color included in that coalition. We had people that represented their agencies and were administrators in their agencies and did a good job of being sensitive to the needs of victims of domestic violence. But it's funny that, I don't remember anybody bringing it up that we needed to have a more diverse representation in the group. Is that what you're referring to, Yatonia?
David, thank you for sharing that experience with us.
That's exactly what I was referring to, because sometimes we don't realize that is a need for diversity if it never comes up, if the conversation never occurs. So just your awareness that this is important to have a space of someone who's actually going through this or from that community to bring the need up, that's the awareness in itself, and that's power in itself.
That's right. That's right. Thank you both so much for that. And David, what you just shared actually is a wonderful segue into a video that we're going to share with you all right now. Thank you, Andrew.
As a child, I would climb up on the lumber stack and look over at the white school. Huge school with a band, football team, everything that you could imagine. And on our side, here we were with our two-room school, outdoor toilets, and 2 teachers. And gradually, as the Black population in town began to go down, that left my mother there at the school as the principal, the janitor, whatever was needed, she had to do everything. And as long as there was one Black child left in town, they had to keep the school open. So 10, 9, 8, mother was there till the last child, the last family was forced out of town. So I remember one day, mother and I got in the old station wagon because mother had heard that the school was going to be torn down. We went inside the school, we got whatever records we could find, we put them in the back of the station wagon. Then a big bulldozer came and dug a deep hole. And after digging this deep hole, just pushed our beloved school in the hole and covered it up. And it was as though it was never there. Years later, when I was in graduate school and people would talk about urban renewal, I had a particular perspective. To me, urban renewal meant They'll dig a deep hole and push your school, cover it up, and it'll be like the school never existed or you never existed. I'll never forget those days. Even today, this town of Sheridan, Arkansas is an all-white town. And if you ever have an opportunity to go through that town, drive very slowly.
So thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. So the reason why we wanted to share, this video is for two reasons. One, because it brings back the topic of urban renewal and its impact, but also because we also talked, I shared a little bit about, Plessy versus Ferguson and a bit about, Brown versus the Board of Education. And so this video in particular was designed by StoryCorps, and StoryCorps is an organization that builds connections between people through personal narratives. And the narratives that you heard was from Reverend James Seawood, who grew up in Sheridan, Arkansas in the 1950s. And this video in particular is very important to us because it acknowledges that, the NAACP and the Legal Defense Fund and others had the best of intentions for really pushing and advocating for the desegregation of schools, right? However, the idea that the segregation, that segregation would just end because of a judicial edict was by some estimation naive, right? So I know many of you, may disagree with me here, and that's okay. And I expect and appreciate that. But the NAACP and the Legal Defense Fund's approach was flawed. They didn't engage in conversations with a variety of stakeholders. It wasn't inclusive of other systems like the labor system, like the housing system, like the task code and transportation, et cetera. And so we fast forward here 60 plus years later, and Black students overwhelmingly still go to predominantly Black schools, which wouldn't be so bad, but for the fact that, Black students do so for the same exact reasons as in the days before Brown versus Board of Education. And I say that to say that history has taught us that we cannot work in a silo, that, like Heather McGee wrote in her book, The Sum of Us, when people unite across, racial and ethnic lines, there's a solidarity dividend that really helps everyone. And that is how we at Power of Two really center our work. And so in this moment, I'm going to turn it over to Yatonia to walk us through, Power of Two's intentional process. Yatonia?
As Erasma shared, these experiences and learnings, they shaped our values and our commitment to a community-centered and equity approach. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we are not the makers of history, we are to of history. What I believe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. meant by this is our experiences today are linked to our experiences of the past. And the only way we can change our story is if we are aware of the past and its impact, learn from it, and center community and equity simultaneously. This is what we do at the Power Tool. We learn from our experience, we live our experience, and then we teach from our experiences. Next slide. Community mapping, community-led and equity approach Power Tools, understanding appreciative inquiry, listening, and engaging with our community, cultural sensitivity and team recruitment, relationship building, and program and team evaluation, community and power sharing. The tools of our power tools are 7 listed here. We developed these 6 years ago, and we use them as a guidepost into our work. Community mapping, how we understand, listening and engaging. All of those are how we handle our power tool, and we engage with our parents, with our students, and our children. Next slide, please. Community mapping, which focuses on identifying, understanding, and leveraging, and it strengthens what we already have in the community. Community resource inventory identifies local government reps, our city council members, our assembly women, our community board leaders, our politicians, our reverends, anybody who advocates for your community, presidents, religious leaders. They determine our current political climate, learn about other programs, learn about chronic issues that may impede folks from participating, partner and establish relationships, ongoing relationships. Next slide. What are, next slide. What are some of the assets in your community that you regularly celebrate? And anybody could feel free to answer.
Thank you, Yatonia. So this is a question that we're opening up to the group, right? So as part of the community mapping and inventory, we're curious to hear from you. Like, what are the things in your community that you celebrate that you feel are so, instrumental to its health and well-being? You can share in the chat. You can unmute yourself and share. We want this to be, a dialogue. So I can start. I will share that in my community of Brownsville, Brooklyn, where I was raised, there are a lot of different, exciting and interesting subcultures, and there's a lot of opportunity to really engage in conversation with anyone. Anyone that you stop on the street will make time for you and talk with you. Regardless of whether or not you're from the neighborhood. Anyone else like to share?
I will. There's a lot of thoughts that come to mind, and I've been in the Orange County community since 1974. I raised my kids here in Middletown. They had a strong youth soccer program, baseball program, sports. I'm a track official, and so I'm sensitive to the fact that Section 9 does a good job of providing athletic opportunities for our kids. I'm really thankful because I've been involved for the past, 25 years with Cornell Cooperative Extension, and in the context of Relatives as Parents program. And, the community's fortunate to have something like that in Cornell at the time when Denise Veriano and others formed the Dependent Care Alliance, and then that kind of spilled over into the rap. There was some, and it's developed into one of the premier programs in the state for providing services for relative caregivers who are raising their grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc. So, I mean, these kinds of resources, I think we have a real strong mental health system in the county with the person who's in charge of it. She's also the commissioner of social services. So those are the things that I think are assets in my county.
That's fantastic. Thank you, David, so much for sharing. Yatonia, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you, everyone who participated. Similar to what many of you have shared, some of the assets that we look to identify whether we are engaging with the new community are individuals who are members of the community. What are their specific skills and strengths? What are their unique gifts and talents? Community. What are the social groups that exist? Volunteer groups, teams, advocacy groups, associates, community board, institutional, shops, housing, schools, libraries, CBOs, financial institutions. I can tell you, for example, there are 92 houses of worship in Brownsville. I can also tell you that there are 4 different train lines, 14 medical care facilities. There are 8 food retailers meeting the 10,000 square foot threshold in Brownsville, providing a total of 1,820 square feet of food and retail space. This means the food, retail to population ratio for Brownsville is 29,758 square feet per 10,000 people, resulting in full retail shortage of 1,400 and 1,000 square feet. Next slide, please. Community conversations and stakeholder interviews, keeping our equity lens on ensuring that we are inclusive of everyone in the community we host. Community conversations in Spanish and English and other language, Mandarin and Creole when applicable. Average of 20 people at each community conversation, and we host 3 in each language and compensate for everyone's participation, provide childcare, meals, and transportation. In those conversations, we talk about community strengths, assets, individuals, community institutions, learn about the community's culture, because there are subcultures that inform perspectives and attitudes, how residents access information, how they understand information, who they trust, what they trust, who they do and who they go to for assistance, which is their family, friends, sometimes community leaders, religious leaders, healthcare providers, and what do they think about in the home programs, the pros and the cons, and the issues that they have and some concerns that they have. Who would they prefer to engage with? What are some of the qualities and characteristics of practitioners that they trust? Who are the community gatekeepers, local government reps, community members, assemblywomen, communities, board leaders, community leaders and advocates, tenant associates, presidents? Determine the current state, political climate, learn about other programs, learn about chronic issues that impede folks from participating, partner and establish relationships, ongoing relationships. Next slide, please. Here are some blurbs that explain some of our community quotes and conversations. It says, be genuine with us. We can always spot BS. We want to know that you are here for the right reasons. If we hire, from our community, make sure the person is not hanging in the streets. Do not just absorb information from us, share it back with us so we can learn too. Here are some quotes from our community. We invited to expand into Bushwick. We want
Okay, Yatonia may have some technical difficulties, so I'm just going to jump in. Next slide, please.
important and equal.
Oh, okay, you're back. Sorry, Yatonia.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I understand the technical challenges. We're going to go on to the next slide. Okay. So here we talk a little bit about, back to continuing our intentional approach and really focusing on recruitment and talent management. So, as a community that has often been neglected or often felt ignored by government and others, community engagement is really critical part of the work that we do. And so we want to deliver on our promise to every community in which we engage with, that we are a trusted partner. And as part of that trust building, we committed to really creating a team that is representative of the very community in which we have deep roots. And for that reason, we ensure that our team is, culturally and linguistically diverse, reflective of the populations we engage with, and are relatable to our families, which really helps to ensure that there's increased comfort and ease of service and engagement. Building a team with, personal ties to the community, some of who themselves have participated in our program, is part of our effort to support economic mobility in our community. And so from the recruitment stage and onward, we establish candor and respect with our team rather than using typical, talent acquisition practices of hiring from the best colleges. We develop tools that really gauge a candidate's cultural sensitivity, their personal connection to the mission, their ability to reflect biases and work styles and cultural awareness, and sensitivity and creativity, and also their own professional aspirations. And this has really allowed us to bring together a team with deep connection to the communities we interact with, and an experiential knowledge of communication methods that really reflect our community's history and culture. And I can tell you that 89% of our team are from the very communities that we partner with. Let's see, the next slide, please. So at Power of Two, advancing equity within the organization, doesn't only begin with hiring, and it doesn't end with hiring. It is woven into the fabric of our very organization. Specifically, as you can see here, in keeping with our core values of care, humanity, justice, innovation, and communication, all team members receive an overview of our racial equity framework, as well as our organizational functions and our decision-making process. We have, training on critical race theory. We also connect team members to internal activities and networks, such as affinity groups, lunch and learn sessions, and team gatherings based on their interests. And we implement feedback loops, which can help to build trust with team members and learn about their varied perspectives. And based on their distinct job functions, we're able to address specific issues that may be affecting them and affecting our larger community. In addition to that, we have our regular check-ins where we identify interests and partner with managers to really build social networks internally and externally with other organizations and professional associations and other groups that really can support, team members of color and others. Additionally, we tether our trainings to shared leadership, which really tasks us with the responsibility of a team environment that relies on, what we consider to be the cornerstones of leadership: shared purpose, And that is where team members understand the main objectives of the initiative and ensure that the team is really prioritizing a collective goal. The other is social support, in which team members provide emotional support to each other by showing encouragement and celebrating individual contributions. And the third is voice, right, in which the ability of each team member to provide input into the team process is valued by others. One of the things that we implement pretty regularly is user manuals, right? So how do we want folks to know how to interact with us, right? We don't want people to guess or make assumptions. We want to share. And so we all have our user manuals explaining to folks how we like to communicate, how we like to engage in conversation, how we like to work, etc. And so that removes all of the guessing games. And this slide also shows you all of the different ongoing trainings that we provide our team on the model, on the history of racism, more in depth than what we've done today. How we navigate the systems of child welfare and health and education, et cetera. And really, how do we make sure that we're developing authentic and trusting relationships with our community? And Yatonia, if your tech issues are cool, I can transfer it back to you and you can talk about the ambassador program.
Yes. Our ambassador program, I'm standing there in the middle. I was a graduate of the ambassador program, and it was a great experience. From my part, I got to see like the inside and being actually a participant of the program first with my son. I thought it was something that was really beneficial. And as you heard in my introduction, I'm a mom of 3, and it was I had to learn everything all over again. My oldest is 10 years older than my youngest, and he's 4 years old. My oldest is 13. So experiencing this program of Power 2, it was so powerful and life-changing to me. And I felt that it just brought so much light, and I just wanted to share, like everybody needs to find out about this program. Like more moms need to know about how what can we do to be better moms, or and that we're not doing anything wrong, but from our past experience, from our past traumas and hurts, we're only doing what we know how to do, is survive. And is change behavior comes from learning new techniques, learning new methods. And this is exactly what a community ambassador does. They live the experience, they live the past, and then they learn from it, and they work to do and help their children in a better way. So our direct service programs and our trusted partners relationship serve as an impetus for our community ambassador initiative. It fosters racial consciousness and builds social relationship framework to advance advocacy and create opportunities for families to reclaim and exercise their power. Parents who speak directly from advantages of lived experience are themselves identifying and co-creating hyper local solutions that address the current and historical issues, the healthy development of children, families, and community. Our community ambassadors have engaged in not only leading outreach efforts, but also mobilized and are active participants in a variety of campaigns related to child care expansion of the child tax credit, serving on the board of Power 2, prompted for the early relational health ecosystem. There were 24 of us that have graduated from the inaugural ambassador program. Next slide. Because when families have access to a full scope of resources and support that address racial and economic inequalities by reducing toxin, stress, and are supported in participating responsive parenting and core skills, young children thrive. They benefit from a supportive environment that promotes brain, architect, and socio-emotional development. This ecosystem where we bring a host of partners together holistically, prioritize the foundational relationships throughout a family's interaction with various community resources, including prenatal, pediatric services, childcare and early learning institutions, physical and mental health providers. Next slide, please.
So Yatonia here, I know that we were thinking about going into breakout rooms, but
yeah, we might not have time.
We don't have much time. So what we can do is show the video and then quickly talk a little bit about how we define equity, for ourselves. Sorry for interrupting you, Tony.
So a friend of mine had talked about just equity in general being the existence of difference. But another friend of mine said that when we're providing equity, we're giving kids the ability to live life on their own terms, which is to say, we've provided the educational opportunities where they can decide what they want to do, rather than having their decisions foreclosed for lack of knowledge. And so when I think of equity, I think of fit. What fits the people that are in my room? And what can give them the ability to live life on their own terms when they leave me? So I don't want to be the system and the dispenser of knowledge myself. How can I create the conditions for inquiry to occur, to develop the skills they're going to need to be independent from me so that they can then practice that stuff on their own? I'd rather not be like a superstar to them. I'd rather be a Sherpa. I'd rather be the guy that's guiding them through, and then they start to understand, I can do this. Because you can only know what you can do when you do it independently. Yeah. And so how are we setting up our systems, for all of our vulnerable children so they can live life on their own terms? I think that's equity in the best way that I understand it now.
So thank you for indulging us with this video. And so if you can share in the chat, how do you define equity, and how does your organization define equity? And in the interest of time, we'll continue with the presentation, but would love to hear your thoughts on equity. And I will thank you, Yatonia, so much for guiding us through, the power tools. Really appreciate that. And for sharing your experience with the Community Ambassador Program and just generally with our program as well. I know that some of you may be wondering, well, what have been the results of your community-led and equity approach? And so we wanted to share some highlights with you. So we'll just keep this up for you for a little bit. As you can see, we have partnered with over 1,000 families and children just in this past year alone, and really engaged in healing from trauma and supported, our families in reconnecting with, with our Indigenous values. And we co-created platforms that really help caregivers strengthen their emotional connections with their babies, but also build capacity among our partners so that they too are part of the healing ecosystem in our communities, right? Because as I said before, we can't do this on our own, right? It takes a whole ecosystem of people with like minds to really create change. And so, we ground our work in equity, in community voice and choice, and we really attempt to facilitate mutual understanding across partner agencies and really responding to new challenges with flexibility and compassion and sensitivity to community needs, right? Because we don't know it all, and we want to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself, that we don't push for certain policies without fully understanding how those policies would be implemented on the ground and the impact that they would have. And the only way to really know and understand that is to co-create and co-direct, what the solutions can really look like. Next slide, please. And so here, what we're leaving with you all is, a list of questions that we call them like guiding questions or guiding principles, that we regularly ask ourselves, not just, leadership, but at each level of our organization. And they really serve as a guide to holding ourselves accountable. And we really encourage all of you to use them and to reflect on them when you have a moment. And so that, that concludes our presentation for today. We're incredibly grateful that you joined us in this conversation and that you were able to share. And we're happy to, put up our contact information if you wish to reach out and learn more about our work and engage in dialogues about, how you can borrow some of our tools. But we'll also want to leave time for questions if there are any questions for me and for my colleague Yatonia.
I'm going to ask you a question. If there's none coming, I'm going to, and that shouldn't be the last one though. But I mean, first of all, this is so very impressive. And I think you're doing the work you're doing is so, next level. And this is a level really that I know many organizations are striving to get to. And so as opposed to, building themselves up from the beginning like that, they're basically unstructuring or deconstructing what they have in order to then replace it with models that really foster, that kind of culture of belonging, that, sense of equity for everything that we just heard. And I'm wondering if you have any tips for, anyone here or who's listening to the recording on, where do you start? What do you, or not, maybe not start completely, because I think many organizations already started, but what are some points what would you point out basically for folks who are working with organizations that can help to push this process along?
Sure. So Yatonia, I'll start and feel free to jump in. We recognize that, lots of organizations are older than we are. We're only 6 years old, right? And so have pretty structured, frameworks and operating systems and policies. But I encourage those organizations to spend some time doing some analysis, right? And analysis at every level, right? That engages not only the leadership, but, management and the field team and everyone in really starting to evaluate how, if these policies and practices are causing harm, to ask questions like, who are they benefiting? Are they benefiting us or are they benefiting the community? Something as simple as that, right? Starting with your operations team and saying, hey, can you analyze our recruiting strategy, incorporating an equity lens, and let me share a framework. And I'm happy to share, the framework that we've utilized in doing that. But also being okay with the challenging conversations, what we call courageous conversation. Yep. And inviting everyone to participate, identifying, affinity groups or activation groups within your organization that are really committed to doing the work, and engaging them all in the process. So this process wasn't led by me, and I'm the executive director. This was co-led by everybody in the organization, and they themselves were the ones that, formulated what kind of groups and what are the specific policies and practices that they wanted to hyper focus to make sure that it was representative of our core values and our mission. So start small, start with one policy or one practice and invite everybody to engage in that conversation.
I think that's a great step that you can do over and over again.
That's right. And remember that, it takes time, right? It can't happen overnight. And so be forgiving of yourself, extend yourself some grace, and you're not going to always get it right, but that's okay. And community recognizes that, as long as, they too are involved in supporting that effort.
I have a question.
Sure.
You talked about community conversations, and that I'm interested in that concept. We tried that in the county about 7 or 8 years ago. It didn't, to my view, it wasn't given much of a chance to succeed. But I was particularly interested when you were talking about that you incentivize the attendance in some way. Compensate, did you say?
Absolutely.
Could you elaborate on that? How did you compensate people for attending?
Sure. So we compensated, everyone's taking time, right? So I'm taking time, to do the work, and I'm getting paid for it. So if I'm asking community members to come in and share their particular perspective, and they're taking time from, caring for their children or whatever, I want to compensate them for that. So we provided, our families, $50 for them to participate in these conversations with us. Some participated in 2, some participated in 1, whatever they were comfortable with. And we provided childcare. So if they wanted to bring their children along, we had a specific area for the children to engage and have snacks and do a variety of activities. And we provided food and transportation for all of the participants, because we were asking, to give us of their time, to share their experience. So that's how we compensated them. But in addition to that, part of the partnership is, if whatever we gather, we don't just keep for ourselves, right? So all the information gathering that we did, we shared back. So then we reconvene everyone and said, here's what we heard from you. Is this correct? Does this make sense? How do you want us to implement, your suggestions? What are your ideas related to that?
How were you engaged to do the community conversations? Were you brought in by an agency, or how did you enter the community in the first place?
So yeah, so for the community conversations, whenever we go into a new community, we tend to identify, as part of that community mapping work, identify, specific, trust leaders and partners in the community that have deep roots there. And then through those conversations, we say, okay, would you help support us hosting these community conversations for us to get a better understanding what the community experience is like? And so they help with some of the recruiting of participants.
I see. And the funding for that, that was somehow freed up by your grants to allow you to do that, or
Absolutely.
You didn't have any budgetary problems for that?
No, I mean, we're a nonprofit organization, and, part of our work is to go into communities that want us to go and support, their parenting. And so, as part of that, we have allocated specific funds to allow us to first engage in the community the community mapping, the community conversations, to really gauge whether or not there is a need for us, whether or not we could really, provide a benefit to the community, because we don't want to cause harm, right? And so the mapping work in these community conversations really helps us to understand, should we be here? Does the community really want us here? Is it just, 100 people, or the community as a whole? And so we partner with institutional donors, and they provide us with support to do that pre-work whenever we go into a new community.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Sure. You're very welcome. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much for having me and for having Yatonia. We were really grateful to have been able to share space with you, and hope to be of further assistance, if needed. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you both so very much. And Andrew, of course, as well, for providing the technology. But really, what a fantastic program, and what a great way, I think, to really, yes, leave us with so much, paths that we can continue to go in our respective communities. And I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone here for coming, for sticking with us. This was the last session of the conference, and we hope that you will join us again next year for the continued Growing Resilience series, where we have a variety of fantastic speakers continuing to discuss resilience and resiliency in our communities. And yeah, look out for that information. There's a link in the chat for an evaluation. We always love to hear feedback. If you can fill that out, that'd be great. And in the next few days, you will receive the recording. And with that, I want to thank everyone and wish you all the very, very best.